What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about other factors out there and why the market sold off the way it did on Friday, what I think is going to likely pan out as time goes on. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, and the offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, as far as the market's going, we got this very big rejection on Friday as we got bad economic data and a lot of fear that was emerging amongst different factors that led to this very big sell-off. Now, even though we're very heavy right now, and I do think we could dip a little bit more from here, it's very possible we dip a little bit more. We're entering a very critical zone where lots of buyers have defended SPY very close to that range between 597 to 598. And if buyers defend there, and we could see SPY hold this very key EMA, there's a good chance the market could actually try a bounce very soon. So I'll talk about how this is going to end up panning out in just a couple of minutes. Let's first do a very quick recap of Friday and then talk about some big news coming up. Then I'll talk about the charts. So as a reminder, the whole market took a very big hit. We saw Nvidia down 4.05%, and we're seeing a lot of new changes. We saw tech dump quite a bit, but some sectors such as health, technology, and consumer non-durables were a little bit more in the green. There's a reason for that. I did talk about that on Friday. I'll talk about that very briefly today, but just know the majority of big tech ended up dumping because of some new news. Now, the Dow was also down about 700 points for one of the worst days since 2024, technically. And we're seeing a lot of fears about economic growth because of that. So what happened so far? Why did this end up happening? As a reminder, our PMI data was not good whatsoever. The only thing that was decent was manufacturing. That was very close to expectations, but everything else was much below that, which in turn gave us more and more insights about how we're seeing a lot of declines in business growth, right? We ended up seeing U.S. business activity growth come very close to stalling entirely for the month of February. Not the best of news, at least thus far. There's also a lot of fears amongst prices going up, which led to this. So if you actually look at our data right here, we were expecting one of the highest inflationary readings we've seen in a while. We're seeing the 5-year inflationary expectations well above expectations because people are afraid prices will continue to go up, likely because of tariffs and factors like that. Now, keep in mind that for the week, okay, we just have Domino's Pizza and Berkshire Hathaway announcing earnings on Monday. We also have Hims after market close. On Tuesday, we have the Home Depot and Planet Fitness. And then on Wednesday, we have Lowe's and a few more, not to mention Nvidia, Snow, and then Salesforce and a few more like that. But Nvidia is going to be a big one on Wednesday, so get ready for that. Besides that, everything else is a little bit more minor. Now, I want to just call out something else that is leading to some fear, and that's the fact that we have these tariff threats and actions. So this is kind of like a summary of it so far. So just keep in mind that when it comes to China, we've seen a 10% tariff on all goods. There's some exceptions, though, with imports under $800. It's actually reduced a little bit. But besides that, since February 4th, we've seen that taking place in China. The Canadian and Mexican tariffs could also be imposed very soon, 25% on most goods and 10% on Canadian energy, delayed up until March 4th. So that's going to be very important. We'll see what happens for the month of March. That's leading to some fears because this could be affecting lots of prices from petroleum, not to mention food, and that's having an effect on prices today. Because when you have these consumers who are looking at prices, they have these fears of inflation going up. It's going to be affecting their buying patterns and what they think, and that oftentimes also contributes to why prices go up as well. So there's a lot of fear right now about prices going up, inflation continuing to go up. People are just trying to buy up things as much as they can. We're seeing egg prices just continuing to soar. It's pretty wild. And there's other factors, affecting that as well. But I just want to mention that we're seeing the trend continue. And then for most nations, we have 25% steel and aluminum imports, 25% tariffs, on steel and aluminum. And then we also have reciprocal tariffs on all nations that Donald Trump was talking about. We're going to be watching to see when they announce this. We're waiting to see that maybe by April, we're going to get more updates about what the rates will be and etc. So get ready, guys, for very big economic changes. The reason why a lot of the health stocks did well on Friday is because there was this new virus discovered in China. It was discovered in a lab. It's not necessarily spreading, but they are saying that has the potential to, lead to pandemic level, another like pandemic level incident. So it's not really the best of news. However, I do want to say that what's good is the fact that it's not spreading. That makes me more optimistic. Hopefully nothing else happens from this point on. But that once again was good for those vaccine stocks, and the list goes on. Anyways, that is it, at least so far. Let's now just focus on what's going on with the charts with all this negative news. So, we don't have much coming out until we have Nvidia's earnings on Wednesday, and then for the broader markets, we have minor data on Monday and Tuesday. So Monday is going to be very quiet, just a couple of like bill auctions, so nothing too crazy. What do I think is going to happen to the charts now? Let's just focus on the charts and nothing else. So, unfortunately, guys, we got this very, very big dump, especially on the 4-hour time frame. When you look at SPY, we're trying to hold our 200 EMA at support at 599.5. We have to try to hold this, or else we're going to be at risk of dipping even more. And I think there's a good chance we might see a temporary dip below this, but if we could try to reclaim this during the week, we're going to be fine. So when you have a big red bar like this, two big red bars, you don't typically just bounce immediately. What typically happens is you dip a little bit more. So examples like right over here, you dip a bit more before you try to bounce. Also right here, we dipped more before we tried to bounce. You know, that happens like a lot, especially historically. Another example is this big red bar here. We dipped a little bit more before we tried to bounce, and that just tends to happen a lot. There were other instances where we actually dipped for another couple of days before we bounced, but typically these big red bars do lead to a bit more downside. So my main point is that I think we could dip a little bit more, and we'll have to see how we end up reacting. So don't be surprised if we see SPY dip a little bit more like this, all the way down to about that 597 to 598 area. Why that range? Because here we had a wick right here, which is support, support, support. There's been many times where we try to hold around that 595 to 598 area. So I do think we could be dipping a little bit more to at least 598, possibly a little bit below that. But then I just want to mention that because there's not too much news coming out, it's very possible that the market will try to rebound and will try to see us bounce. Because the day before, if you guys look back at the charts, right, if you look back at what happened the days prior, the market was near all-time highs. So we just went from all-time highs to suddenly getting a 2% drop, right? It just happened so suddenly. Typically, when that happens, you do see the market try to bounce, at least for the short term. So could SPY dip a bit more? Yes, it can. We could be dipping to about 598 or so for a little bit more downside. But then we're looking for a base. Typically, the base is going to be between 595 and 598. I do think we're going to base around there. And there should be a bounce coming as we get closer to Nvidia's earnings. I do anticipate that and move back into the 600s like this. And then we'll see if Nvidia causes a big rug pull or if we continue to rally. We'll see depending on Nvidia's earnings. But a move like this is very probable, a dip and then some kind of rebound. I think the market is due for that. So keep that in mind as the most likely possibility. As of right now, I'm not seeing too many major catalysts for Monday and Tuesday, so hopefully we see the market base and try to rebound. That's the most likely possibility. If we lose 595, we're looking for a move back down to 590. If we reclaim this trend line right here around 603, we're looking for a bounce for 606 to fill that imbalance. Once again, a small dip and a bounce is the most likely possibility, so just keep that in mind. Now, same thing with the QQQ. Now, notice that the QQQ has a tendency of, we're just going to close these lines real quick. We love to get very close or even below our EMAs and bounce. It loves to shuffle around them. And in this case, we do have a strong support right here. It loves to bounce around 521 to 522. And then also our 200 EMAs at 522. So that's a very, very nice confluence of support. I believe that the QQQ could be dipping to like 522, a little bit into the low 520s, just a tiny bit more downside. And then if we could base at 522 and hold our red support at the 200 EMA, I'm looking for a move back up towards 530, just like that, as the most likely case, especially as we get closer to Nvidia's earnings. A small dip, a little bit more downside before we try to bounce is very probable. Unless we end up closing below or lose 522, I think that this is the most likely case. So watch 522, we should be bouncing off of that. And if we get back above like 525, we're looking for a bounce. A dip and a bounce is very probable for this chart. We are due for that, so just keep that in mind. For the Russell 2000, here's the thing about this. Now, go back to the charts. Notice that we had very strong support at 217 all the way down to about 214. And that 214 to 217 range is very, very strong support. We've bounced there every time for the last couple of months, ever since like November. So unless we get a major bad catalyst, what's likely to happen is this. Even if we get a bit more downside, even if we get close to like 215-ish, we should try to rebound back up to about 220. That's the most likely case in my personal opinion, especially as we approach Nvidia's earnings. Look for a little bit more downside towards 215 and a bounce to 220 as the most likely case, because I think that we dumped really hard without a bounce and we're due for that, at least for the short term. For ES, the same thing is going on. Now we look bearish because when you look at the chart, we're starting to lose the support right here. The question is, will we continue to hold below this or will we end up getting bought back up? I just want to mention that we could dip a little bit more, but the news is not that major. Most of the news is likely going to cause some just temporary fear just for now. I do think we're due for a small little rebound move. Now, we love to bounce off these supports very close to 6,000. Notice that ES, since like the beginning of February, we had 5980, then we bounced, we had 6,000, we bounced, 6,000 bounce, 6,000 bounce. So we're near that support right now. I'm going to be watching to see if we get some kind of bounce off this or not. So if we lose 5980, I will turn a lot more concerned. But as long as we're between 5980 to 6,000, we should be looking for strong support there. So I could see 5980 to 6,000, that range. It's possible we get to the low 6,000s. But as long as we don't end up losing 5980 to 6,000, there's a good chance we try to rebound for 60, 75 or so for a little rebound just like this as the most likely case. As long as we don't lose that support, there's a good chance we try to bounce just like that. For other factors out there, we have the Russell 2000. Sorry, not the Russell 2000. NQ is what I was trying to say. NQ could be dipping a bit more, but notice the same thing as ES. There's support here at 21,400. It bounced off that. 21,500-ish, we bounced. 21,500, we bounced. We keep on bouncing. So in my opinion, I think there's a very, very good chance that we could be dipping closer to about 21,500-ish, very, very close to that range. And then we'll have to see if we get some kind of rebound or not, especially as we have the 200 EMA acting as resistance. So in this case, we could be dipping a little bit lower towards 21,500, and we'll see if we get some buyers that defend, if we get some kind of bounce or not. So give this the time it needs. In my opinion, I think that we could be looking for a bounce. I think there's a very, very good chance that we dip a little bit more, but we have to see if 21,500 holds. If it does not hold, we could be dipping closer to like 21,250. I don't favor that. I think it's very likely we make a move like this, dip a little bit more before some buyers try to get us back above this trend line. This is also very close to our key fib level, so there's a good chance it tries to return. For Bitcoin, notice that Bitcoin loves to bounce near 94,000. It's possible it just continues to trade sideways, dips a little bit more to like the 94,500 area before it tries to bounce to our EMAs. But it's just trading sideways in a range. It's not really doing a whole lot. So look at the last couple of months. It's been just going back and forth and back and forth. Not much is going on with this. Now, on Nvidia, I'm eyeing the possibility of an inverse head and shoulders. Not a guarantee, just a possibility. I talked about this before, how we have like a left shoulder, a potential head, and then like a right shoulder that's like forming, and we'll have to see if that leads to a big bounce or not. My gut is telling me that this might be dipping a little bit more towards like the 130 area, maybe a little bit above that 130 to 132, and then we could be looking for an attempt to return, especially as we approach earnings. Hopefully earnings causes a bounce or not, but if we do try to return to these levels approaching earnings, we'll see if earnings causes a rug pull or a big bounce. That's going to be affected by earnings. But for now, I do think that a move like this could be what's happening approaching earnings, right? A little bit of a dip towards that 130 to 132 area, then a bounce back up towards 140 as the most likely case. We also have this left shoulder head and then maybe a right shoulder that could be forming, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. For Tesla, I want to mention that we're on a downtrend, unfortunately, right? We had this high here making lower highs, lower lows, continuing to fall and fall and fall and fall. Now, to bounce, you want to reclaim 362. If you could reclaim that, we're going to bounce. But for the short term, it is looking a bit more bearish as we're in a bearish channel and our EMAs are sloping downwards. So we're going to be looking for that very, very low 330 area. Can we bounce off that or not? There's a good chance it continues to decline. I would love to see it reclaim 350, but I think what's going to happen is we dip a bit more into like the 330 zone before it tries to bounce for like 350. That's the most likely case, but look for a little bit more downside as a very strong possibility. I'll be looking for that level all the way down there between 330 and 325, which is where we had previous support, to see if we bounce off this. We're also very, very close to our key fib level. If you draw a fib retracement chart, we're actually near the 0.76 retracement area. So it could dip towards the 330, maybe a little bit below that before it tries to bounce. It is due for some kind of rebound move as long as there's no major bad news. That could be just a very temporary move, so give this some time to develop. But I do anticipate a little bit more downside, especially near 330, so give this the time it needs. For Apple's looking weaker on the 4-hour. We have this resistance around 248. We're looking for support around 243.85, not to mention 240. I think there's a good chance we try to dip a little bit lower for 243.8, and we'll see if we bounce or not. So keep that in mind, guys. There might be a little bit more downside coming, especially as time goes on. So keep that in mind. Look for some downside, a very, very nice move towards 243.8. Then we'll see how we end up reacting. For Netflix, we're on a bit of a downtrend here, making lower highs and lower lows. We're watching to see if this could hold support. I think it might be visiting this 1,000 area. If that fails, I'm looking for like 990, and I think we try to base around that range. We're at a very, very key support right here at 1,000. It is possible it dips a tiny bit more before it tries to rebound for 1,020. So a move like this on Netflix is very probable for a small dip and a bounce. I'll be watching that very, very closely. For MSTR, the same thing is going on. We're actually on a downtrend right now. Now, notice that we're making lower highs right here, especially as we're losing the support. So it is possible we dip to about 300 flat before it tries to bounce, but 300 is a very psychological level. We got to see if buyers defend there. If they do, we're looking for a move back up to about 310 plus. So keep that in mind. However, what I could see is that we might dip a little bit below 300, all the way down to where these lows are in like the 290s, and then buyers may defend us, try to get us back above 200 or 300 from there. So there could be some downside before it tries to bounce. So just keep that in mind, guys. That's a very, very likely possibility. For Celsius, we pumped very, very hard, especially after some good news came out. It pumped really hard without much of a dip. It only dipped just a bit. So I think that it makes more sense for this to essentially, consolidate and slowly make its way down towards 30 again. I think 30 is going to be retested before it tries to bounce a little bit, but there might be a little bit more downside coming. For Supermicro, we're looking for a test of 54.93. If that does not hold, we're looking for a dip to about 52. So be careful, guys. This might decline just a little bit more. It might just be like a temporary dip, especially because of this gap down here. So it might dip a little bit more like this towards like the 52 to 53 area before it tries to bounce again with Nvidia's earnings. But look for a small dip that's coming before we see another big move. Palantir, I was looking weak right here. We got this big rejection. We're watching to see if 100 holds. If not, we have a giant gap to fill around 80. 100 is a very psychological support, so we'll see if we could try to hold the 100 for now and consolidate a bit before, as time goes on, we eventually start dipping to fill that gap in the 80s. There's a gap down here. So I do think it's going to jump to about the 80s very soon. May take a couple of weeks for us to officially get that unless we can't hold above 100. So we'll see. With that being said, that's what I'm essentially seeing, at least for Palantir. For Rivian, we're rejecting right over here. Despite the fact that we had their earnings, unfortunately, it's not doing the best of jobs at holding up. So, it's possible we end up retesting like 12.5 or so before it tries to bounce. There could be a bit more downside before some buyers defend and push us back up to about 13.3. So just keep that in mind. For SoFi, we're rejecting. We're watching to see if it could hold support. I do think that this is on a bit of a downtrend here, so it might be dipping closer to about 14.25. So it could be a dip towards the lower 14s before it tries to bounce, but I do see a little bit more downside as a strong possibility. For AMD, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We're going to be watching to see if we break out or not. Otherwise, this may continue to downtrend. We got a rejection. We're not able to hold above this trend line, so there's a good chance it tries to dip closer to about 108. And we'll see if buyers defend that or not, so just be very careful with the charts. For ARM, we're on a bit of a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows. There's no sign of a bounce yet. I could be looking for a bigger dip towards basically this imbalance over here around this like 140 area, and we'll see if we bounce or not, so just keep that in mind. For Coinbase, coin is on a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows. This is continuing to downtrend, so we'll have to see what happens at least with these supports right here. We have this resistance, which is now becoming support right here as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if coin actually dips a little bit more towards 230 to about 224 before it bounces. There might be a little bit more downside coming to the low 230s. So keep that in mind, guys. A little bit more downside before it tries to bounce. 230 to 224 it could be tested very, very soon. For Amazon, we're at a very, very key level. Now, notice that we have this resistance and support around this 215 area. We need to hold 215, otherwise this could continue to fall. I'm watching 215. We have to bounce off here and test this trend line. If not, we could be dumping to like the much lower 212s. So 212 could be coming next if we don't hold 215. So be very, very careful. I do think we're going to be testing 215. It's a very, very key level. We'll have to see if we bounce or not. Although we are looking a little bit weak, it's possible we dip to like 212 and then bounce. If we reclaim 215, we're looking for a move back up like this. And if we break resistance, it's going to be a bounce like move. But that's what I'm seeing for now as the most likely case. For Meta, we got this big rug pull. I would like to see it reclaim 704 to bounce. Otherwise, it's going to dip more. I think that there's an imbalance down here. So what's likely to happen is we're going to test 680 and eventually back down towards like 674. So 674 to 680 could be tested first before it tries to bounce. We might be coming back down to fill this imbalance. So just keep that in mind. For Microsoft, we're looking a little bit weaker here. We're looking for a test of about 405. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. We love to bounce. There's a lot of wicks around this 405 area, so I could be looking for a test of 405, and we'll see if we bounce or not. That's a nice support, though. It loves to do that, at least historically. I think that Google could be retesting 180 to 178, so we could be dipping to 180, and we'll see if we bounce or not, so just give this some time. For GameStop, we're looking for a move back down towards 25, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For AMC's in the middle right here. Could there be an inverse head and shoulders? It's a possibility, but like I said before, this doesn't usually make the biggest of moves. So Yes, maybe we dip a little bit more towards like the 3.3s before it tries to bounce. There's still like an inverse head and shoulder setup, which looks pretty good. DJT is looking a bit more bearish. We could be continuing to fall towards the next support. I wouldn't be surprised if we get closer to like the 25s before it tries to bounce. Our next support is going to be around 26.5, so it could be testing that, if not 25, and then we'll see if we bounce from there. The VIX is broken out. It's continuing to dip right here, so will it continue to fall as the market bounces? It's possible the VIX does something like this where it just consolidates a bit up here, and then if the market tries to rebound approaching Nvidia's earnings, maybe it dips just a little bit. Just like this, it's very probable, at least for the VIX. For the 10-year, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We're watching to see if we could hold our 200 EMA. The dollar is doing the same thing. We're on a bit of a downtrend. We'll have to see if this holds. We're continuing to fall. This tends to be interesting, but we're going to be watching to see if this breaks out or not. If this remains bearish, the market could try to bounce, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. My view of the market is quite simple. I think that there's a good chance that the market may see a little bit more downside tomorrow, but we're going to eventually be looking to see if the market could base, especially for SPY and the QQQ. Can we base at our next supports, especially between 598 to 595, before some buyers defend and try to push us right back up into the 600s around 605 plus. So I'll be watching that very closely. With that being said, guys, I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please have a great rest of your day. I'll be back with another updates tomorrow before market open. Until then, I wish you all the best and peace out.